Okay, before we get started, go ahead and check your answers for your homework. Now would be a good time to pause the video so that you can check them quickly. Okay, so what we're doing today is proving why the two triangles are congruent. Alright, the whole purpose of this is just kind of to go through and say exactly what is congruent and why. Alright, so you're always going to be given some kind of information to get you started. Alright, the first thing that you should do is go in and draw this information in so that you know what you have already. So if I know AB is congruent to CB, I can make marks there. I also usually make a note that says why I know that. I know those two sides are congruent because it was given to me. I also know that AD is congruent to CD, and again, I know those two sides because they were given. Right? So as I go in, this one already has the statements written out for you, so you're just having to fill in the reasons. Again, if I want to prove something, prove two triangles to be congruent, I have to have three parts of that triangle. Alright, so I've got to show all three parts in my proof. Alright, step one says AB is congruent to CB. Well, if I look at my drawing, AB is congruent to CB. We've already written that in, and the reason was given. You're always going to start with some kind of given reason. Right? You can't start proving triangles congruent without some kind of information to begin with. Alright, the next one is the same way. AD is congruent to CD. Again, we know those two sides are congruent because it was given. So we can write given again. Alright, the third side, if I'm looking at my figure, the third side is this reflective, or this shared side here. Alright, I know it has to be the same because it's the exact same segment, or the exact same size, and that property is called the reflexive property. Okay, so I know that BD is going to be congruent to BD because it's the exact same thing. And again, I use reflexive property for that. Alright, my last thing says that the triangles are now congruent, and just all I need to write for the reason is why they're congruent, or what method tells me that they're congruent. Well, if I look, I have a side, and a side. So side, side, side is the reason for those two triangles to be congruent. Alright, in example 2, let's say that we don't have any of the steps provided for us. We just know that we want to prove that these two triangles are congruent, starting with the information that we're given. Alright, same thing that I want to do is draw in the information that it tells me. So it says QM is congruent to TM. And again, I make a little note off to the side that those are given. Alright, and then XM is congruent to RM. Again, that is given. Alright, so my goal is to go through and tell all three parts of the triangle that are going to help me to realize that they're congruent. Alright, the first thing is to list the given information. So the first thing that I know is that QM is congruent to TM. And the way that I know that is that it was a given statement. Okay. I also know from my information that XM is congruent to RM for the same reason. It was given already. Well, to prove that triangles are congruent, you have to have at least three parts that show that they're congruent. So I need to look at the triangles that I have, figure out what information do I need to prove that these triangles are the same. Alright, I don't know anything about these sides here, so I know it's not going to be side, side, side. Alright, so I've got to look for a different option. Because angle M is shared between both of these triangles, I know that they are congruent because they are vertical angles. Alright, so I'm going to write that in. And again, make a note, they're vertical. And because M is shared with both of those, I got to be specific as far as how I name that angle. So angle XMQ is going to be congruent to angle, and then I got to make sure to match it up. So if I go X to M, it's got that. If I go X to M, it's got 2 dashes. So I need to go from R to M over here since it's got 2. So angle RMT. Right, the reason that those are congruent is because they are vertical angles. Alright, which is a theorem that tells us that those two are congruent. Alright, well, since I've proven all 3 parts that I need, I've got a side, another side, I've got an angle here. Alright, I need to look at my image to see how are those in order. So it's side, angle, side, side, angle, side, and they match up. So the last thing that I need to write is just the proof of the triangle being congruent. So QMX is congruent to triangle TMR, and it's because of the side, angle, side. Alright, with this proof, we've got information here that you need to be able to understand. If you see something like that, it says DR is perpendicular to AG. Alright, if I know that DR is perpendicular to AG, the only thing I know about perpendicular lines is that they create 90-degree angles. So I can draw in a 90-degree angle there. And I know those are it's because of those perpendicular lines. The other information that it gives me is that RA is congruent to RG. So I can mark those in. And I would want to put that that is given information. Alright, again, in this proof I don't have any information given to me, so I've got to start out with just the given statements. Alright, because only the one thing is actually telling me something about the triangle, I can write both of these at the same time. So DR perpendicular to AG, and then RA is congruent to RG. Alright, the reason for that was given. Alright, as I start to work this out, then I want to kind of build off of whatever was given to me. So I want to build off of this perpendicular line. Alright, I have to look. What do I know because of the perpendicular lines? I now know that I have 2 right angles. Right? So I'm going to put angle DRA and angle RG are right angles. Alright, and that's just because of those perpendicular lines. So it's this definition of perpendicular lines. Alright, well now if both of them, so I haven't really proven anything that's going to help me say why the triangle is congruent. I still only have this one side here. But now I need to talk about, if I know that one or both of them are right angles, then I know that both of them have to be congruent. So angle DRA is congruent to angle DRG. Alright, and the reason is because they're both right angles. So you can just put right angle theorem, or definition of right angles. Right, we know that they have to be 90 degrees, so therefore they are exactly the same. Alright, looking back at my picture, all I need to do is figure out what else can I prove in the triangle that is congruent. Alright, the only thing that I know for sure that is congruent are this middle line, because it is shared between both triangles. So I can write for 4 that DR is congruent to DR, And if you remember from example 1, it's just called the reflexive property. Alright, well now that I have everything that I need, I've got a side here, I've got angles here, I've got another set of sides here. I can just look to see how are those congruent. So if I look back at my picture, I've got side, angle side, and side, angle side. So I have everything set up to prove the triangles are congruent. So I can go ahead and write that last step, which is triangle DRA is congruent to triangle DRG, and the reason is side, angle, side.